today I'm going to be going over three reasons why the Ediacara biota of South Australia are so awesome. So, number one, they're so old. So they're so old, they're the earliest evidence of complex multicellular life on Earth. And here's a very generalized timeline of Earth. And you can see about 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth formed. That's 4,500 million years. That's a long time. And for most of Earth's history, it was largely single-celled and microscopic life that dominated the Earth. And we call this vast chunk of time the Precambrian. And it's called the Precambrian because it came before the Cambrian period. And the Cambrian period marks the beginning of the Phanerozoic era, which is when animal life really diversified. And we are living as part of that Phanerozoic. But during the Ediacaran period, right at the end of the Precambrian, something truly remarkable happened. The first large, complex, multicellular organisms evolved, and these are the Ediacara biota. And we have some of the most diverse fossil assemblages of the Ediacara biota in South Australia, in the Flinders Ranges. And we think they're around 555 million years old. So that's about 500 million years old. That's very, very, very old. So number two, they are arguably some of the oldest evidence of animal life on Earth. So here's an illustration of a community of Ediacaran organisms. And you can see there's lots of different types of organisms that lived. And critical to this, you'll see there's a lot of texture on this sea floor. So they were all living under the sea. They were all marine organisms. They lived on the sea floor. And there was this organic mat. And we think this organic mat was very important for the lifestyles of these organisms. And one reason we think some of these organisms might have been animals is because they showed general patterns of body plans similar to animals. So they had bilateral symmetry, which is, if you divide me in half, for example, my right and my left are mirror images of each other. And they're not exactly the same, but this is called bilateral symmetry. And we also have a differentiated head and tail end. We have a different head and tail. And we think that these general characters together allow animals to be able to move, to be able to propel themselves. And we have evidence of Ediacaran organisms moving. So there are trace fossils on the sea floor we can see from 500 million years ago. So here's Dickinsonia. We think this might have been some kind of a flatworm of some kind. A lot of these organisms were still uncertain about their affinities. We know that some of them might have been animals, but a lot of them are quite alien to us. And you can see here there are traces where Dickinsonia was moving along the sea floor. So this is evidence of movement. It might have fed on the sea floor, on the organic mat, we're not sure. And then Kimberella. So Kimberella we think might have been a very distant ancestor of mollusks that live today. Mollusks are like animals like sea slugs and snails, and we can see feeding traces of where Kimberella was scraping the organic mat off the sea floor. And these are really cool little trace fossils, these little squiggly lines here. These show where an organism, a little animal, was propelling itself through the sand. So you can see the Ediacaran seafloor was very busy with life, active with, thriving with organisms and Ediacaran life. Okay, number three, we think the Ediacara biota of South Australia was so awesome because they show unique preservation seen nowhere else in geological time, in Earth's history. So we don't just get individual fossils, we get whole communities of organisms. And we see this snapshot of these organisms preserved in time, which is really cool. Some of the best fossils are found in Ediacara and Nilpena Conservation Park in the Flinders Ranges. And we see whole vast surface areas of seafloor in the Flinders Ranges, fossilised seafloor from 500 million years ago. And this is because the Flinders Ranges used to be a submarine basin. Around 500 million years ago, during the Ediacaran period, there were Ediacaran fossils colonised these seafloors deep in the oceans, or in shallow oceans, I should say, actually. They weren't in deep water, they were in shallow water. And there were these burial events where sand would come down and dump on top of them and bury these communities. And then a new community would re-establish on this fresh sand, and then another burial event would come down and bury this community. And this happened over and over and over again. And we see layers and layers of these sediments, these ancient sediments, preserving these communities. And Wapena Pound is a famous rock formation, Ediacara rock formation in the Flinders Ranges, and you can see these lines going across the rock formation. These are literally the layers of the sea floor. And so here's an example fossil bed from Nilpena fossil site. And this is the same bed with some workers and scientists making casts of the individual fossils. And here's one of the main quarries in Nilpena. And you can see the layers and layers of sediment there of the sea floor preserved. And this is one of the really special things about Ediacaran fossils. We can really immerse ourselves in what the environments might have been like where they lived. We can see the whole community is preserved in time. We can see what they were feeding, how they were interacting with the environment around them. It's really special. So the Ediacara biota of South Australia are awesome because they are so old. And they are potentially the oldest animals on Earth that we know. And their unusual preservation allows unique insights into how they were preserved. So hopefully I've convinced you that the Ediacara biota of South Australia are the best fossils in our state.
Nothing will prepare you for the world that once was here. Everything was strange back then, but it all disappeared. So take a trip into your mind back to another time. 600 million years ago lived creatures of the slime. Creatures of the slime, creatures of the slime. 600 million years ago, those creatures of the slime. Creatures of the slime, creatures of the slime. 600 million years ago, lived creatures of the slime. For 3 billion years, life was as tiny as can be. Microscopic algae floating all along the sea. Then the big trees came, and as it melted over time, thus began a new age with those creatures of the slime. Creatures of the slime.